Muhammad, you wrote really eloquently about the escape from Gaza to Cairo. Can you take us a little bit inside of what you experienced as you escaped?
It wasn't really an easy journey to commute from the north of Gaza to the south, and then eventually going from the south, stepping into Rafah and just trying to, isolate yourself from the war as someone who's been in the north since the moment it started, since October 7th. I've been on the field in northern Gaza trying to cover everything around the clock as a journalist and as a writer. And so the moment I had to make the decision to leave wasn't an easy one, to be honest. But it was for safety concerns. It was for safety and survival first and foremost. Although I try to be always determined on persevering in my work as a journalist from Gaza, but I think um, the imperative need for survival took precedence in this particular time. And so I had to evacuate Gaza with my family along. The process was a really challenging and a tough journey along the way from the north to the south, as I have been stopped by the military along the way, interrogated for around like 3 hours around my work, my identity, my background as a journalist and as a writer from the north, and as someone who's also been targeted and has received a number of threats to seize my work, to stop my journalism, and to stop my writing when I was in Gaza before the destruction and the bombing of my house.
So Muhammad,
So
sorry
yeah,
to interrupt, but so while you were reporting in Gaza, they were sending you like text messages and calling you and telling you to stop your work as a reporter.
yes,
And
yes, I
and
did
by
receive
they I
that.
mean the Israeli military.
I mean, yes, yeah. I mean, more than once, repeatedly, and it escalated really rapidly. It started as text messages. It started also on trolling and on Instagram, on Twitter, on social media, and then via emails. And then lastly, I received a phone call ordering me and my family to evacuate the house. Um, we never did. We thought like it wasn't very serious, to be honest. We didn't take those threats seriously. We thought it was an attempt to scare us, to stop, like to make sure that I stop writing and stop reporting. But at the end of the day, they were pretty serious about it. So the house was bombed. A lot of people got injured. A lot of people sustained serious injuries, including myself and my family. But at like we are lucky to make it out as survivors, but it wasn't an easy experience. Like I had to keep a low profile after that, but I resumed my work as a journalist shortly, like after I recovered from my injuries. Because in the north of Gaza, people have been grappling with a lot of challenges. Like there is no one also to speak about what's happening for the people on the ground. There is a limited number of journalists in the north of Gaza, particularly in Gaza City, where I was residing and sheltering with my family. So there was famine, there was disease, there was the destruction of the medical system, there was the collapse of the humanitarian fabric as well in Gaza City. So there was a number of catastrophes and humanitarian crises that the people had to navigate on a daily basis, which no one was really able to talk about or just to communicate to the world. Um, yeah, so that was basically what I was trying to do, and which I was, a target for what I did in return. But finally, we are safe. We're right now in a very different position. Although it's not home, but at least it's much safer, away from the bombing, away from the danger that's escalating in there. Um, and so, yeah,
Muhammad, before October 7th, how did you ever see an Israeli soldier?
no, 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 no. Like Gaza was under a full-scale besiegement from, the ground, being surveilled as well from the air, being also like from the sea as well. There were always the Navy ships that belong to the Israeli military,
The reason I ask,
but we never had the
the reason
yeah,
I ask is because I interviewed a filmmaker from Gaza after he left Gaza, and he said he described it to me
yeah.
as being tormented by kind of I don't remember if he said a ghost, but you don't see your enemy. It's just like they're always surveilling you and watching you, but you don't see them, is how he kind of described it to me. Would you agree with that assessment?
Exactly. I mean, exactly. As someone as a journalist as well, I'm emphasizing on this. Like my work has always been on the radar of the Israeli government. I mean, as someone who's been a resident and a journalist in Gaza, you're always under the watch of these surveillance systems. Although you never have the experience of encountering like those soldiers on the ground physically and just running into the checkpoints in the Israeli, like targeting personally on the ground. But at the end of the day, you're being under their watch, you're being under their radar. And so it wasn't very safe to be reporting even before October 7th. It wasn't an easy mission to be a journalist in Gaza, even before this all happened. But it escalated in the way it was very dangerous. It escalated in the way it was very exposing you to those attacks very seriously and at the same time very directly from the ground, from the air, and from the drones that are, hovering overhead all day long and all night long, 24 hours.
Can you take me through the first day or two or that first week when you were reporting when the war first started? And I don't even like to call it a war when the bombardment on Palestinians started after October 7th. What was your mindset as a journalist? Like, what were your, like, can you take me through that process as a journalist deciding how to cover this situation?
Exactly. I mean, as like I witnessed the devastating toll being inflicted on my people from every corner. I saw death firsthand. I saw targeting of civilians. I saw targeting of journalists. I saw the targeting of everyone who wanted to speak up and who could speak up. So I felt like it was my national duty to be like communicating what's happening from Gaza to the world. So aside from being a journalist by profession, it was like a national responsibility to step up. You know what I mean? So I wasn't on the payroll of any media agency on October 7th when it started because I was all independent by myself trying to write and trying to post everything that was happening by camera, by text and everything. But even after I was contacted, like to be a reporter from the ground, I kept on the mission of speaking on behalf of my people because they were suffering a lot. They were like the huge consequences on the ground were very indescribable, to be honest. The destruction of infrastructure, the destruction of every means to sustain life and breath in Gaza was deliberate, was systematic. The deliberate also attacks on everyone who wanted to have the message of the civilian casualties on the ground delivered to the world was also like a target. So it wasn't very like it wasn't an easy mission to do, but we took on the responsibility of being at least a voice to everything that was happening. Because what was happening was being done to us as Palestinians, no matter what you do or no matter what you are, whether you are a journalist, a civil servant, a rescue team, a health crew, a social worker, a teacher, a doctor, you are being under the same structure of the same policy, which is attacking everything alive and moving in Gaza. And we have seen it, like we have seen the targeting of the health system. We have seen the targeting of people being displaced from one place to another, hoping to like survive the destruction and the bombing from one area only to be killed in a different area. So I try to maintain this kind of voice. I try to maintain this kind of message and responsibility, aside from the fact that I am a journalist and I'm getting paid for this. I only wanted to do what my conscience wanted me to do is being a voice and being at least a source of information from the ground to the outside world.
So, Muhammad, how did your family react? What were they trying to tell? Were they trying to tell you, to stop your journalism work, or they also felt that it was a national duty for you to continue?
Like they were pretty scared about that, and I was really too, but they never had the idea of forcing me to stop or ordering me or telling me that you can't be doing this. They were always very generous, they were always very kind and supportive, but at the end of the day they always had this kind of fear and sense internally that we could be a target because Muhammad is speaking up, and which we did. I mean, after a few months, we were like in December on the house collapsed, it was targeted, it was bombed, but they never even ceased thinking about continuing to report and continuing to speak up, even though I was in a very dangerous position after I resumed my reporting after the injury. Because I was running across Gaza City from one place to another and trying to shelter at the same time while trying also to provide for my family. But they were very online with me. They were very supportive of my work and of my mission, hoping that I could be always safe, despite it being a very far possibility at the time. But they were my source of support, and they're very kind. They very embraced the idea that I should be able to speak up, despite the fact that it could be the reason we all can get attacked.
Yeah, but
Um,
I'm sure they're very
so
proud of the work
yeah,
that you've done, and I'm very proud of the work that you've been able to accomplish there, and with all the circumstances surrounding you, your family, and everybody else in Gaza. Is there like a journalism support group in Gaza, or is it like, are there journalists on the ground in Gaza that relied on or were able to, get feedback from, or what was the situation on the ground with journalists? Were you guys working together, helping each other, or are you guys all just scattered across Gaza, just working your own little bubble? Like, what's going on out there? Are you guys helping each other? I trying to get a sense of, because you saw a lot of videos of, when
yeah.
like some journalists would stick together, but how was it for you in the north?
Yes, I mean the number of journalists, speaking of my experience from the north, there were very limited number of people who were wearing the press vest. For two reasons. I mean, journalists from the south were not being permitted entry into the north, whether international or local journalists. And secondly, because each and every single media organization commuted to the south following the evacuation orders of the Israeli military. So those who remained in Gaza City remained because they had no choice, remained because they had to stay there, whether it's for their families, it's for their freelancing work, it's because they were sheltering there, it's because they wanted to be working from there. But allow me to say, if there was any sort of unity between journalists in the North, it was always emotional support and unity. Because as for professional equipment, as for media crews, as for the tools that was necessary for us to keep on reporting, they weren't very available. A number of international media organizations who are doing some kind of support and equipment support for Palestinian journalists in Gaza tried to secure entry into the north, but they all failed. So those of us journalists who could lose any way of continuing the work, they had no replacement for what they lose. Like, for example, I lost my laptop, I lost my computer and the destruction of the house, and I lost a phone of my, I had two phones, and I lost one during the attacks and the displacement, and I had no one to help replace or get anyone to be able at least to provide any alternative for that. But
Muhammad,
that was never, yeah,
I spoke with an organization. I don't know if you're familiar with them called Arij,
yeah,
and can what's your knowledge about them? Because they shifted from an organization that um was like training journalists to during the war trying to get
supporting
equipment
that. Yeah.
to journalists. Were you ever able to reach out to them, or what's your experience with that organization?
I had some correspondence with Aries through a number of persons in Gaza as I was reporting, and there was a plan to provide me with a camera, with a laptop, with also a power bank and a phone. But no matter how much we tried and we attempted to make that happen, it never did, to be honest. So I never received any sort of like equipment assistance, although they planned and they really tried to do that and to make it happen, but it was very almost impossible to reach the north of Gaza.
Yeah,
And
because of
yeah,
the
yeah,
Israeli army, right? I just want
yeah.
to make sure the it's understood that the equipment wasn't able to reach you because of the Israeli army, not because Adij didn't try to.
That no, no, no. I mean, they tried. I mean, along with other groups and media supporting agencies. I mean, they really tried, and they. I think I'm not really sure about this. Maybe you have to ask around after me. But I think they did succeed in delivering some equipment for a few other journalists in the south.
Yes, yes, they did. I think when I was speaking with them, they last time I spoke with them, they said they were able to help about like 200 people or something of
Yeah,
that number.
yeah, yeah. I think so. But to the
But
north, it
not in
was
the
very
north.
yeah. It was not possible to reach these sort of assistance for journalists.
Yeah, because even the route, because they when I spoke with Arij, a lot of the people that help them are volunteers, and I can
Yeah.
imagine the danger of just traveling. Can you speak to that? How dangerous it is, or it was for you to travel when you were in Gaza from point A to point B, even if it was a small distance?
It was very small, but the danger was very catastrophic. It was very huge responsibility and a risky mission to run across the city and to cover every sort of bombardment and evacuation and death and targeting and everything.
But Muhammad, while
Because
you were covering, you were also searching for food and water and supplies for your family, right? So you were like multitasking while you were working.
yeah,
Can
I
you?
mean, I was doing like I had to manage the challenges and the conflicting demands of personal safety, of professional responsibility, of providing for my family, of taking care of my 3-year-old son and my old parents and sister, and wife. Um, but to be honest, it never occurred to me why I'm like very insisting on continuing to report. I always thought that it's my responsibility as a journalist, but always safety comes first, right? But I never like had the idea like maybe I should stop, no matter how dangerous it was. Particularly because journalists, and I'm speaking for myself, I never felt that I have the immune or the protection to be running down the streets just to be able to report a story, because you never have the potential to walk down the street if there is a drone overhead, because as soon as you're identified as a journalist, you're dead. That's it, you're over. That's the mentality that we are trying to encounter and that we are trying to face.
So
So
the
at one
minute,
point,
Muhammad, so the minute you guys would see a drone in the air, it's time to go into hiding.
it's time to go down. Yeah, it's time to like to flee the area first and foremost. It's time to keep a low um appearance. It's time also to maintain some sort of
So the press,
silence, even though
so the press,
temporarily.
so
Yeah,
the press vest is like a target.
exactly. So at one point I throw that away. I felt that it was
I
no
would have
longer of
too. I
use.
would have never. I would have stopped wearing it.
I
That's
mean, it functioned literally as a red target, as a red flag, as a red mark. for the drones, for the war plans, for the artillery tanks and fires positioned across the streets. Because it's not only you're escaping the drones, it's about also navigating the streets that have artillery troops on the ground positioned. Okay, because we were dealing with displacement and with evacuation orders from one place to another. And the place that we were ordered to evacuate, a few hours later, there are Israeli soldiers across the same street that you were sheltering in. So there is no way back for you in there. And even if you did, you're done. You're over. And I've lost colleagues who have been in the same situation. I've lost like a number of colleagues and friends and mentors and people who were by my side reporting since the beginning of the war, and they didn't have the luck to survive these tactics and these strategies. Because at a sudden, let me like explain it in a way that would be make it more simple. At one point, you would be running across the street, seeing the smoke of one residential compound being hit, and then once you make it to the scene, you get surprised that you are a target now. Like you can't flee, you're surrounded from every corner, and the war plants are just overhead. Like you're now being watched, and it's not unlikely that they can also fire or shoot you. There were also very dangerous tactics that the Israeli military employed, which is snipers on the towers of the main residential like areas in Gaza. So that was also another form of danger and risk that inflicted on us, because you would be peacefully and safely, or relatively peacefully, walking down the street, and you could be surprised with a bullet just hitting you in the back by a sniper that you didn't see coming. um, so that was also some sort of an explanation to the danger that was happening from every side.
So what I'm trying to, I, so I have a teammate. So I don't know if you know this, I play for our national team, the Palestinian baseball team, and we have a few
Yeah,
teammates that are, who are from Gaza. They're from the Tafish family. I don't know if you know them,
yeah,
but one of our teammates, he was martyred uh a few months ago, and it just the story of his martyrdom sounded familiar to the stories that you were telling, where they were forced to evacuate a certain neighborhood in the north, and I believe he from the family was sent back to go see if there was anything that he could gather after their home was targeted, but
yeah.
he was then targeted, and the family didn't hear from him for days until somebody found his body. Is that a very similar story that a lot of Gazans have faced?
Yes, yes, to be honest, until this very day, you can see the bodies and the people scattered across the streets only because they wanted to go seek some, food, some assistance, anything that they could get back to their starving families, only to be killed, whether by an artillery shot, shell or fire, whether it's like by a sniper or by a drone, by a um, like a war plan, and their bodies could never be discovered until the day the Israeli forces withdrew from that neighborhood, which would be very late for these people to be rescued. Because in Gaza City, it's a very small area of distance that experienced displacement a lot of times within the same short period of time. Okay. So food was rationed. Um, like the humanitarian assistance that did make it into the north was very enough, and never enough for the people to make like around 900,000 people survive. And I think you've seen it firsthand also on the news when the floor massacre took place in Gaza, which is basically a number of people who were trying to secure some bags of flour for their people in Gaza City in the north. because they had no choice. They knew it was very dangerous. They knew it was very risky to go down there, but they had no choice. It's either getting killed by the war plan, or it's either getting killed by hunger and starvation and lack of medical attention. Um, and so, yes, there is a number of tactics and there is a number of strategies that the people had to make a way around, but they rarely like make it. They rarely feel like they have the potential and the possibility to continue to survive these things. And I've said it before that, let's say, I mean, and I said it before, like whoever survives death in Gaza doesn't survive life, because there are every part of the neighborhoods in there are being displaced, which is all the remaining population in Gaza, and those people have survived 9 months of killing and starvation. You know what I mean? So we're all in this together. We have all in this been together, whether journalists, people, civilians, residents. It's in the same spot.
Can you speak to that of how Gazans have come together to support one another during this time? Because I could imagine that if, everybody had a everybody for themselves mentality, the destruction and despair would be much worse. And I just imagine that people are just being gracious to each other, or how would you describe it?
I mean, there has always been some sort of social harmony and social like connection between people. But I also believe that you can't give what you don't have. I mean, no matter what you try to do to your sick neighbor, your injured friend, whatever you do to them, you wouldn't feel like you're doing enough, and they wouldn't feel like you have done them what they needed. Like for example, if you have a friend who's been shot or injured by an Israeli sniper, you can't do anything to them because there is no hospitals around that could treat his injury or bandage his wound. If your friend's kid is dying from starvation, you can't save him because you don't even have the food for your own starving children. If your friend has their homes targeted or destroyed, you can't really, there is nothing much that you can do to them because you yourself is living in a tent that's always like a few footage square with 10 people of your own family living it together on top of each other, you know. So no matter, I think people were always trying to show some sort of support and connection and social love, but the options were very limited, because at some point, every single one of the population in Gaza, of the people in Gaza, needed the same thing. They needed a safe shelter. They needed the necessary food. They needed clean drinking water. They needed a safe area that they can sleep in without worrying that they can't make it to the next morning, you know?
Yeah, Muhammad, we have about 7 minutes left, so I have two final questions for you. The first question I want to ask you is, uh, speaking to that of the lack of the ability for you guys to. I thought that answer was very powerful that you just gave. Did did you guys, while you guys were in Gaza, and if you spoke to other people, did you feel support from the diaspora, from Palestinians outside of Gaza and Palestinians outside of, Palestine in general? Did you guys feel the support from them? Did you get or would you guys have liked to see more support from the diaspora?
I mean, we have seen a lot of scenes and footage from people from across the globe, whether Palestinians or supporters of the Palestinian people, come together in solidarity against what's been happening in Gaza. And it's really like necessary to see these images at a time that we are doing everything we can to maintain this sort of let's say existence, per the very least. But what we are dealing right here is a system that tries to strike at the trenches of the Palestinian people and their demands for liberation and basic rights. So I think it's necessary to have not only to have this sort of action from the diaspora, but to have it sustained and to make it consistent, because what Palestinians are asking for isn't just a ceasefire. Okay. um Although, like, it's really necessary to stop the bloodshed and everything people are facing in there, but it's also necessary and more important to sustain some sort of normalcy in their lives, because these people are asking for dignity, they're asking for equality, they're asking for justice, they're asking for liberation, they're asking for the ability to be able to travel within their own fragmented parts of the homeland. So what we are seeing right now is partially, or more importantly, focused on stopping the massacres and the attacks committed against Palestinians. And when a ceasefire is announced, everyone goes home and that's it. I mean, it's okay to come together in such powerful gestures, but it's necessary to make it sustainable, you know it's necessary to keep it ongoing even after a ceasefire is announced, because people are asking for life. They're not asking, like, they need to stop suffering, but they need also to be able to live and to heal after a ceasefire is announced.
Yeah, I think it's very important that people, especially around the globe, understand that prior to October 7th, the living conditions of Palestinians was unacceptable, and
Exactly.
their freedom has been demanded since 1948. So I think that was very well put, Muhammad. I want to leave it here with we have about 3.5 minutes, and I want to give you the floor these last 3.5 minutes to just, if you and your fellow journalists in from Gaza have any message to journalists in or outside of Palestine in the West, what is that message, Muhammad?
I mean, we are very thankful to everyone who's trying to do the least they can and everything they can outside. But if we have one simple, clear message, it's that what we have seen in the beginning of the war, the early days of this, was very huge in terms of solidarity around the world from every corner. And what we are having nowadays is just like a lessened form, like, or let's say a less common ritual by the people about what's happening. So it's not because the war is going into its 200 days now that things should be normalized. I mean, death has been surfacing. I mean, it's around the corner in every street of Gaza. Lack of any means to sustain life and survival are becoming very impossible in Gaza. So when the world accepts the death of 40,000 Palestinians in 9 months or 10 months, I think it's not too it wouldn't be long to have like 100,000 deaths um in another 10 months. So I think the attention shouldn't be shifting right now, because the war is taking on a longer shape and a longer period of time. It should be further emphasized, more um, programmed towards the needs of the Palestinian people, which is liberation and freedom and
Muhammad probably lost connection. I'm going to try to reach him. Oh, yep. We lost Muhammad, but we had less than a minute left in the interview. Oh, there he is. Muhammad, you're back. Yes?
yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
here,
Yeah, so Muhammad, we have less than a minute left, but I think you cut out
yeah,
like right at the end of your answer, which is perfect, which is fine. But I really wanted to say thank you for your time, Muhammad. I know that it was really tough for you to get internet connection while you're in Cairo, and to set aside any amount of time for me. I really appreciate it, Habibi. Um,
absolutely.
and please call me anytime. Let's stay in connection. I'm gonna share this when I publish it, and obviously we'll be texting and talking uh, forever, inshallah.
Habibi Nader, thank you so much. I mean, you are a true friend and a sincere brother to me, and I will never forget the assistance and the hand that you gave me when I was in Gaza. I mean, you've been truly supportive from every minute.